Hello, everyone. So this is the last session of the day. Hopefully it's going to be nice and exciting. And then we can all go out. Woo! My name is Justine Pocock, and you might know me on Twitter and all the other things as WigglyKoala, and I am a web designer at Code Enigma. And previously I was a front-end developer, so I know how to code, and this new design thing is a bit new, but I come from a graphical background, and these are the principles that I learned when I was at school, so this is what I'm going to teach today. So, first off, this. You already know what is a good design and what is a bad design. Your brain instinctively something's bad, and there's research being done that means that proves that when you that your brain actually reaches out to and makes your hand move to reach out to something that you consider beautiful. And that's pretty much what we want. We want people to use our website. They want you to reach out and interact with it. So learning these design tips can actually really help us. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn the rules like a pro, so we can break them like an artist or a developer. We're going to learn them to be a little bit more mindful, and we're going to spend some time looking at what the users actually see. So I'm not going to talk about code, I'm not talking about grid systems really, I'm not going to talk about anything like that. It's just visual that we can use not just on websites but on our slides for presentations, for marketing materials, things like that. So really core graphic design principles. And we're going to start with proximity. The purpose of proximity is to arrange content into a format that's easy to read at a glance. So this is information architecture, really, putting all the things that are related together and then putting a gap between the things that aren't related to show. The web instantly does this really well. All of the HTML elements are made for that reason. If you're using the right ones, then you're already onto a good call with the actual content, but maybe not visually. That as soon as you start to add CSS to something, you could mess it up. And Drupal also helps loads because the content is usually written once and reused, so with the no kind of format, which means that you can't add new things in some places that you've added in another as easily as maybe like changing the way the footer works on different pages is a little bit harder. So proximity again, like I said, is do you get what I'm doing here? Is to the space between things is just as important as the content and the order that they are in. So like your cutlery drawer at home, if you have one with all of the cutlery in it, it's hard to find your knife, fork and spoon. If you have one eyebrow, it's hard to know which eye to look at. Things like that. So proximity works for personal grooming, your cutlery and your website. And now I need to make some emojis, but hopefully none of you here are going to tell Drupal Camp London that I've done this or that I've reused the talk. But this is their website from this year, and it's a bit gross. The reason they've done this is because Drupal site there, they just needed to theme it somehow. And this is what a very good back-end dev come up with in a few hours' notice. We've all been in that kind of situation before, and this is where knowing these principles really come in handy, because you can turn what could be a bit of a mess round into something a little bit more pleasing to the eye. So the first thing when I look at this site is something is happening in March, and I don't know what it is, but I want to be there. It is big, it is massive. It's in the way of that picture, so I don't know, again, what is going on, but there is something good and exciting happening, because March the 3rd to the 5th, 2017 is massive. Then I see that there's some buttons, and I'm not sure if there's 3 buttons or 5 buttons, and now I finally realised that actually it's Drupal Camp London. So I think the best thing to do is get into this code and jiggle it around and make it a little bit better. So What I'm going to do is remove the buttons and get rid of the fact that we've got the schedule, the buy a ticket, the become a sponsor, the CXO day, and the weekend day ticket all in one row. So this is probably about 30 minutes work max, and it's going to get uglier before it gets better. Yeah. But we've removed that third ticket from the top and just turned it into buy a ticket, because schedule, buy a ticket, become a sponsor didn't make any sense. And if we scroll up, we can see that I've moved all of the information up into the top, so our eye is attracted to the almost card-like area at the top, which tells us the who, what, where, and when. It's uglier, granted, but we kind of can now see what's going on. It's actually a conference, and there's lots of people there. Like before, you didn't know if there was just like conveniently placed people around the edge and the conference was quite quiet. But actually, no, there's loads of people there, so it is busy and it is exciting like I thought it was. But we're now a little bit closer to getting it a little bit better. But we need some repetition. There's some things are a bit strange. And we've got these buttons, and now that heading is black and the buttons are white, and it's all a little bit over the top. So the next thing we're going to do is add some repetition. And repetition, it goes to elements in the pages of the site, and it is where the familiarity and the interest comes in. This is where I get a little bit CSS evangelical, because if you use CSS and HTML like they're meant to be used and not go over the top with, you know, Morton always talks about divitis, but I'm going on about selectoritis, because these days now we get 100 selectors and they all override each other and something else. And that's what CSS does, but when you're 12 layers deep into changing something and overriding it, you've lost that repetition because you've changed something and then changed it back again. So you might be doing something wrong, and that's normally a great indication of knowing that maybe you could probably delete some code and get a bit more in. So I think Tim Berners-Lee put it better by saying that a language which uses fewer elements to achieve something is the same power is simpler, and HTML is really good at that. You've got a few basic things, and if you stick to them and not try and reimagine everything, then you can kind of get a lot further, and it's a little bit better. So like I said, selectoritis is a little bit crazy, and I think with atomic design as well, which is the new designy buzzword things that have been around for a couple of years. But what can we do? We can repeat colors, margins, fonts. We can make sure that there's lots of components that are all the same all the way through the site. So here we go with another video. There's no music on this one. There's only so many times. Look simpler, and we're going to remove those corners because the card at the top was square and it's quite an angular design up there, and then there was rounded buttons, and actually if you scrolled further down the page there was like a rounded circle around people's faces, so it was too many different things going on one page. Okay, so instantly the header's looking a little bit more sensible with the square buttons and the big buy a ticket header, and as you can see, the schedule, become a sponsor, buy now buttons are all the same, making them look a little bit more like buttons. I would argue that red buttons is a bad idea because it sounds like they're not actually buttons, but we're one step closer than we were before. So let's look at alignment. The purpose of this is to unify and organize things. Simply, we are aligning every element with the edge of another element. It's a lot like decluttering your house. If you have a messy bookcase or something, then are inside, and that's the same thing with websites. If everything's all grid systems are helpful here. CSS, grid, and flexible, and these things are great display properties to use, but whatever your preferences is fine. CSS is like Tetris, and if you line everything up in a row, then I think you're winning. Like, if as soon as you start to get gaps and float things in funny ways, then things kind of almost start to go wrong. So that's, I think that's something I try and keep in my head when I'm doing some code. But anyway, you don't just align the text, it's also about aligning buttons and other colors. So here is another video of changing these. And really quickly, so this, the whole of changing this website probably took me about 2 hours to do, but I pretty quick wing changes that we're making, and it's quite handy if you just dip into code every now and again, that this can really if you dip into the front end every now and again, this can really help to just be able to be mindful of these 4 principles. And in a minute I'll stop. Come on. Okay, so we've got rid of that color of the background, and the buy ticket headings kind of floating a little bit, but the red background, there we go. The red background makes it look a little bit better. And now we can see that these buttons definitely are buttons a little bit more. But the proximity of the top buttons seems a bit too close to the top, and everything feels like it's kind of floating outwards from that buy a ticket button. So we'll give it another go over, and we're going to put a little bit more attention into proximity. This one's pretty quick, I think. Give that a change and see we're moving the other 2 buttons that didn't really relate to buying a ticket but were more useful closer to the time of the conference up to the top here. And making them a little bit different because that was going to make life easier. Right, okay. So now we've got more content on the page. What we've actually done is make the ticket the I read down from the left all the way down, and it says all the things that we need to know. I would probably change it around the other way and have the tickets at the front if it was further away from a conference, and then move them so that they're more convenient as the time goes on, but this is all I could do in 2 hours. So your eye reads down and you're a little bit more engaged, and there's nobody stood on that stage, so it doesn't really matter too much that we're covering who's there. If there was somebody amazing there, then I might suggest otherwise, but is that all of those people are looking towards that business card of information, so they're already subconsciously pulling to say, look over here and look at that. And the diagonal lines going down is also doing the same thing. And that's a trick that they use in books as well, where you'll have people on the outside edges of books looking in towards the spine to encourage you to read the entire page. Web design, even though we don't have pages to turn. So the last principle is contrast. And this is where you get to break those rules a little bit more than all the other ones. This is where you make things slightly different. So, for example, the sticky items on the top of a views listing. If it was news and they were special events, you'd make them sticky and they'd come to the top. But if they look exactly the same as the non-sticky events, you wouldn't know the difference apart from the date, and maybe that wouldn't be very obvious. So because they're not identical, you typically would make a little bit different, and things like that would apply for, say, these buttons and things. So let's have a look and see what we would do on here. You don't always have to make contrast really contrasting. It's not black and white are enough. And what I'm going to do here is some time. Here we go. Sorry. Okay, so what I've done here is made this background for the image black, so it adds a stronger border. So this adds contrast between the black of the video, white of the button section. So that makes the button stand out more and give more cue than when white, and that also helps with things looking a little bit better. And I've also made the Drupal Camp London logo bigger because that was the importance of the talk. Now I know that they made the date really large before because apparently they forgot to put the date on the website, so they made it really obvious this year. But so that kind of feels a little bit better. And have you noticed more information on the screen? And so that's really handy because you always need to try and like cram more in the top. Any client that you get probably will turn around and go, I want more up there, and then you have to put a carousel in. And okay, so if we compare that to the original and flick back and forth, I think you might get a bit more of an idea that we've moved the menu at the top over so that that's a bit more joined to the user menu, which some users probably don't need. Made all of that area a little bit bigger actually. And now we've got more of a visual flow going round the website into a circle. And this is an English-speaking website, so people would read left to right typically. So they're going to start at Drupal Camp London and go down and across and then notice the menu at the top if they are looking for more information from if they didn't get what they wanted there. So it's not... Oh, wrong way. It's by removing lots of different elements and keeping it a bit more simple, then we've actually... why is it doing that? Okay. Between those two. There we go. I feel it's a little bit fresher and a little bit more vibrant, and it looks a little bit more professional. And just having those tips can kind of make quite a big difference to your design skills. And that's just 4 of quite a lot of different principles, but these are the 4, like I said, that I learned at uni and they, secondary school, actually high school, and they seem to be quite important. So let's recap on what we've got. Proximity will help you to embrace the white space together and logically with hierarchy. Repetition, all the things are the same and should buttons, lists and headings. Limit your styles, less is more. Alignment, it's not just about the text, line up all the elements. And contrast, make elements stand out to get noticed, and shape, texture and size. So crap will make your websites better. And if you can remember those 4 principles, then handy tip that crap's good. Anyway, I didn't come up with that. This is all mostly from a book called Design Principles for Non-Design, and it'll talk about business cards and other things. And if you wanted to read a little bit more, it goes into a little bit more depth, although there are a few older versions that seem to be easier to get. So any questions? Oh no.
It's interesting though.
Okay.
As a front-end developer, I got the impression that designers live in some sort of fairy tale country where every title has the same amount of letters. So the client gets a design that looks gorgeous, and then you give them their CMS, and they start adding titles that are 4 lines high and all the design.
Yeah.
All the balance in the design
is wildly wrong.
But it's not the first website they design. Why do they do that?
Because saying that a lot of web designers will make a design and sometimes the title will be the perfect site, but when the content comes in, and I've had this lots of time as a front-end developer, and I'm going to try really hard not to make that mistake in my new design role. But it's the thing, I think that it's just a time constraint thing. Well, they'll get given a few pieces of content to design or redesign and then don't necessarily consider longer lengths. And I always found my job when I, as a front-end developer, was to go back and go, yeah.
It's not.
Just keep doing it. Just keep doing it until they learn. Like, there's no other way. People with double-barreled names in a sidebar at the end, and you're like, but they've only got like 6 pixels to write their name in. Like, what are you doing? Yeah, so just keep going back and make that your role to say you haven't considered the line length here. You haven't considered that. I've had the same thing. I've had.
That's like they're just moving all the problems to you.
Yeah. And I kind of half see that is a front-end developer's position. I think that, because everyone says, oh, you're just a front-end developer, and that's really annoying because that's a massive job. And I think that that consideration for you to say, you this bit and I don't have, like, even if a developer comes to you and they've put something in the wrong place, so you can't move the search bar where you need it to be because it doesn't fit in the design, like, a front-end developer has to be around.
Feel it's your
It's quicker and easier as well. Because if you think of components and designing small elements at a time, then you don't have to reinvent the wheel every wasn't.
also often a design.
Then there's one. I think if can we use this one here and here? Designing a website doesn't stop with the designer. Everyone in the then should be offended if you go back and go,
Some sort of preliminary information. We talk the same language.
yeah, definitely. It's hard because designers and developers do talk different languages, and as well. No, go on. That can happen, yeah. Yeah. Well, I had a recent job where I got given a SD from another designer and told to put it in Pattern Lab, and it was like, what is this? I don't know what I'm doing. And you have to interpret somebody else's designs because you don't get given enough stuff, and you have to do it. So this is where, if you know some basic principles, you can actually make that judgment call and say to somebody else on the team, maybe, what if we just use this one? Or that doesn't quite look right, let's make it a little bit different. And no designer's going to go, if a designer's doing that these days, icky fist.
On sharing our codes in Drupal.org and to share design patterns in.
I'd love to. Yeah, I think that, like, so designers have lots of design, like UX and UI patterns that they make, and there's always a new sketch plugin for some different things. But I think so, along with like building a platform, building a distro for Drupal to make massive, great government sites, you could almost go, well, this is basic wireframes of blocks and stuff. The only problem I have with that is that the code can change. Like, so I tried in a previous job to have, we had like a white label build where we would do the same distro, and we found that design didn't fit the code, and you spent a lot of time doing that. But this was 2-3 years ago, and we were stuck in PHP with front-end design and understand. Now with Twig, they're actually reconsidering going back to that way again because it makes more sense. But I really think that this is what a login box could look like. This is what a search bar could look like, this is what filters could look like, and form elements, and all of that would be really great. And the style guide module could be a really good platform to build that out on. Yeah.
And vice versa, a new building blocks in code have a certain appearance. They could be added to the library and then have different styles by different designers on top of that.
Yeah.
So you have a direct interaction between prettiness and...
Yeah, so Pattern Lab kind of already kind of does that, but it would be good if it just was in Drupal a little bit easier. And I think the style guide module that was pretty much, I think it's just Drupal 7 now, but it worked pretty well in the same respect, and that would work really well. It's a really good idea. Anyone else? Hello at the back.
Yes. I feel that if you don't start using components and try to use them on different websites, you'll get wrong design. The typical designer is gone somewhere, and also people use all that bootstrap, so you start getting websites that are very similar.
Yeah.
You browse around the web.
Yeah, that is a problem of having reusable components with design, because they do, you want your design to be fresh and innovative, and if you do fall into that bootstrap problem, which you're saying, then you can get a little bit stuck. But I think as long as the designer and the front-end developer are aware that the market, there's developer also knows that the same framework loosely. It has to be about being very loose and not as strict as, say, a distribution would be.